This is Tankobon. This week we're going over the Marshal King, the new manga by the mangaka Boichi. My name is Cole Greco, and joining me as usual is co-host Jude Knoll. Jude, how's it going?
Doing all right. I've been pretty hype about the baseball season starting, although I haven't actually been able to watch either of the two Reds games that have happened this season.
Mm-hmm.
The first one I had like a grad school class, and the second one I was just out and like not able to see it, but still excited.
Mm-hmm.
The Reds are doing okay, and I know your Yankees are on an insane tear.
Yeah, they're off
They
to a
hit
good
like
start.
9 home runs last night.
Yeah, it was funny. I was looking in the Reddit thread and stuff like on the baseball subreddit about it, and people were making a big deal because they've switched, not all of them, but like some of the players have switched to these like bowling pin shaped bats. Like they've
Oh
moved the
yeah,
sweet
yeah.
spot around,
Hmm.
and people are like, "Well, it's obviously working." Blah blah blah. And I'm like, "Well, I was like, in the first game they scored 4 runs, like
Yeah.
which isn't like bad, but that's not scoring 4 runs isn't like, oh my gosh, we got to everyone's got to switch to these bats now. And like yesterday, they beat up on the Brewers pitching, which is already
Yeah.
like the Brewers. I think have 5 starters that are injured, so it's sort
Yeah,
of
they're
like
not.
I don't know. It's kind of like, yeah, they had a crazy game last night, but that's not really indicative of like, well, everyone should use these bats now because they absolutely slaughtered the Brewers' terrible pitcher.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like the first week or even like the first month of the season is hilarious because everybody is trying to like make huge sweeping generalizations about their team based
Hmm.
on one game.
It's
Because
so
like the Red
funny. Yeah.
yeah, the Reds hired Terry Francona during the off season and everybody was hype about it.
Hmm.
They blew a save on the first game and now everybody's like, yeah, we got to fire this guy. He's a clown.
It's crazy. I don't know. You see it, or I guess I'll see it a lot in like various video games and stuff that I'll play. Like, new character comes out in Street Fighter in the first 2 days. They're like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, this character is obviously broken, right? Like, she's ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. And then, like, after 2 weeks, it's like, no, actually might be the worst character in the game. Or you'll see it for like card games, right? Like Hearthstone, it would be every time. Like the first day, like this
Mm.
deck is broken. Like you can't. Who could? How did this get past testing? This deck is ridiculous. And then like 2 weeks later, it's like, if you play that deck, you are just an absolute scrub, right? Like you wasted all your resources in the first week. And the same thing happens with real sports. 1 weekend, it's like, oh my gosh, like these guys are, this hitter is ridiculous. He's obviously going to win MVP, and then it's like, oh, 2 month cold streak. Never mind.
Yeah, we had some guy last season that got called up in like the later part of the year, and he hit 5 home runs in his like first week that he played,
Hmm.
and then after that, like he got called down 2 weeks later.
Yeah,
Like you can't really make any assumptions based off of 1 week of baseball. It's just
I mean, and was
not
it?
possible.
I guess it wasn't last year, but the year before when they changed like a lot of the base running rule stuff, or like they made
Yeah,
the bases wider, whatever the rule was. I don't remember. Or
yeah, the
the
bases
pitch
were
clock
bigger. Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Um, and everyone was stealing and stuff. And there were like a zillion stolen bases in that first week, and like stolen bases have obviously got up. Like,
Hmm.
didn't Ellie De La Cruz have like 85 stolen bases
Yeah, he
last year or
went pretty
something
crazy.
stupid? So
Yeah.
like, it's obviously a lot easier to steal now, but like there was such this big thing of like, well, you can't pick the guys off anymore. Well, it's like it'll probably be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Most rule changes have actually been pretty good in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and people are just notoriously bad at like one evaluating anything, you know.
Yeah.
So especially after 1 week. All right, well, let's get into the kind of manga discussion today. So this week we're going over the Marshal King, which is the new series by Boichi. If you listen to the podcast before, Jude and I are kind of consistent haters of Boichi's style. So I thought it'd be fun to read his new series and just kind of talk about like,
Yeah.
what do we think of Boichi? Do we still hate his style? What do we think of this manga? Because I haven't, because I don't, I'm not like as involved in like the online manga anime communities as I
Hmm.
used to be. I haven't really
Yeah.
seen any like discourse about this series, so I don't really know how people think of it, other than like I think on AniList it's got like a 73 or something like that, or like a 65. It's got like a fine score.
Yeah, it's weird too because I'm a little bit more like tapped in on like manga Twitter,
Hmm.
but I haven't seen much either. And I think it's because I guess it's a Jump Plus series.
Yeah.
Sometimes Jump Plus series either like blow up or they just kind of like go unnoticed,
Mm-hmm.
at least compared to like stuff that's in the magazine.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it catches on, maybe it doesn't, but I haven't heard anything about it.
Yeah, I think part of it is, and, we can get into this when we actually talk about like the series itself, but the premise and like the setting of the series, it's not really manga Twitter, manga Reddit,
Oh
like
yeah.
fodder, right? Like there's no cursed spirits, there's no like crazy powers like that. You're not
Hmm.
slaying demons and things like that.
Yeah.
It's a western, so it's kind of like, I don't know. I feel like people are like a little less, predisposed to being interested in that.
Hmm.
Um, but oh, do you have something to say?
Oh no, no, I'm good.
Okay. So we'll get into it. So Boichi is a South Korean manga artist. He's 52 years old. Started in 1993 for a girls' manhwa magazine, and then in the early to kind of mid 2000s, he started kind of working in Japan in manga. It looks like he had like a series or two or like some one shots and did like a bunch of hentai one shots, which got collected into this thing called Lovers in Winter collection.
Oh, okay.
Um, Jude, I know you check that out. What are you big Lovers in Winter guy?
Yeah, I honestly considered putting that in our Tankobon Essentials collection, but it got edged out by a couple other choices.
tracking all of the one shots down.
Yeah, the cover art is honestly like kind of insane. Just looking at it on my anime list right now. Okay, I think for me, just like even looking at this, the style is really off-putting.
Well,
It looks like a very detailed, very wet version of like a how to draw manga illustration that you would see like on the cover of one of those books. Like it looks like a very good, like detailed,
mhm.
well drawn
Well,
version of that style.
so it is, but if you look at like the little like on my anime list or any list, they've got like it'll have like that section that shows the characters. If you look
Yeah,
at those, the characters aren't as detailed as his current stuff is. They're like a lot more
yeah.
plain. I saw that's as far as I delved into this collection. I was like, I don't know if I need to seek this out.
Yeah, and honestly, like also just like in terms of problems that I'd had just like off rip with the style without really engaging with the work. Like obviously this cover art is extremely like wet and slimy, which you might just be like, "Oh, that's the subject matter." But then you look at his other stuff and it's maybe not as explicitly like
Yeah,
slimy looking, but there's always this just like
it's very sweaty.
really harsh, yeah, like sheen,
Mm-hmm.
like everything is glistening and
Yep.
like slimy looking.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone is doing those like glass skincare routines that you see on TikTok. Like I really hate how shiny everything is. And unfortunately, the Marshal King is also extremely shiny.
Yes. In different ways though. Like
Yes, yeah, this is better,
yeah,
but it's still very
The
shiny.
Marshall King ends up being like very metallic, but we'll get into
Yeah.
that. And so after this kind of Lovers in Winter collection, his big like first big series was in 2006 with Sunken Rock, and then in 2016 he started up a series called Origin, which ran for about 10 volumes, I think. And then 2017 he started doing the art for Doctor Stone, which that ended I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And then back in February 7th, the first chapter of the Marshal King started off in Jump Plus. So yeah, I thought this would be an interesting time to kind of talk about Boichi as a whole because I've not read like any of his actual like works.
Yeah.
I've not read Doctor Stone, not read Sunken Rock. The only things that I really read of his were he did like a version one shot of a chapter or two from One Piece. It's where like Zoro fights. I can't think of the Mihawk. It's when he
Yeah, I
fights
remember
Mihawk
that.
like very early in the series. Voichi did a version of that, and then there was like a light novel kind of spin off of like Ace's backstory, and he did the manga version of that. And I read some of it. I didn't get all the way through it, which I think is like pretty telling about how I,
Yeah,
felt about Boichi, because Ace is really cool, One Piece is really
yeah,
cool, and like
yeah.
I couldn't get through the manga because, like, frankly, I think his art style is grotesque. And so that's kind of where I want to start this off, is just like, what do we think about Boichi's art style and stuff like that? And like, you know, what awareness did you have of Boichi before reading the Marshal King?
Yeah, so I definitely seen both people like in real life and online talking about specifically Dr. Stone and being like, "Oh, it's like fire. It's the concept is cool," which I think conceptually Dr. Stone does seem pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, like I tend to judge things off of the art style before anything. It's part of the reason I think both of us didn't really want to read JoJo's before we ended up actually doing so and loving
Yes.
it. And now I appreciate JoJo's art style,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd always just thought like Dr. Stone looked butt ugly, like just for the reasons I said before. Like it has this sort of like both a stereotypical anime style of like the big eyes and like
Yeah.
the really generic how to draw manga esque character design,
Mm-hmm.
but then like on top of an ultra detailed like muscular body that is drawn with like such meticulous attention to detail that it looks like it's coming out of like a Grey's Anatomy textbook,
It's super
which
gristly.
yeah. And like although it takes undoubtedly like it takes a lot of skill to draw that way, I tend to very much hate when something looks too like anatomically realistic.
Yeah, I think that's my thing with him as well. Is, you look at his other series, like Sunken Rock is always posted on, anywhere online, is like
Mhm.
rawest manga panels,
Yeah,
manga
yeah.
panels that go hard. It's always, there's gonna be five Sunken Rock ones on there. Um, and you look at it, you're like, obviously this guy is good at drawing, right? Like, you
Mhm.
can't kind of take that away from him. Like, but I feel like people sometimes conflate, like very detailed good drawing with good manga art. Because I don't think he is a good manga artist, or at least like
Yeah.
I don't really have interest in what he does. Like, you'll see his characters, and if any of them are shirtless, you can see they've got like, the chiseled like side abs,
Yeah.
ribs thing going on. It looks very strange. And it just like, it looks really gross and off-putting, and not in a way that, like, Berserk is a lot of times really gross and off-putting, like very detailed, but it feels in service of like the tone that manga is trying to put out. And I don't get that feeling from Boichi, and I don't get that feeling from Boichi in the Marshal King either, right? Like, the Marshal King also has
Mhm.
this very overly detailed style. You look at it and you're like, that's very clearly Boichi doing the art.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have, in some ways it has this kind of gritty tone it's going for, right? It's a western, it's set in the Wild West, that's
Mhm.
people with guns and like these weird kind of like very Toriyama-esque mechs and stuff like that. It's like, in that regard it kind of works, but this is like a shonen action series with like silly gags and like stupid characters and
Yeah.
things like that. And then you have this art style that just feels nasty on top of it, and it
Yeah.
doesn't line up.
It feels a lot closer to like when I've tried to get into Western comics in the past and been
Yes.
like, oh, this art style to me is way too shiny,
Hmm.
realistic, and gritty.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
just like sensory overload. Because I think that's the problem I had most with the Marshal King is like, obviously, manga, especially shonen manga, is usually not like subtle in any way.
Hmm.
But this is just like pure, like almost brain rot levels of sensory overload
There's
in some of
so
these
much
panels.
stuff on the page at any given time. And this was a note that I took down, was I think that like some of the compositions for his panels are actually really good. There's one in, I
Hmm.
think, the third chapter where like this drill thing appears, and just
That
like,
was cool, yeah.
yeah, and where it's like kind of coming onto the page and stuff, it it looks really cool. And like you turn to the page and get to that panel, and you're like, oh, this is awesome, right? Like this giant drill thing emerging from the ground. But then like you look at the panel for more than 2 seconds, and it just starts to turn into this like blur of just
Yeah.
lines and stuff. And this series wasn't detailed in the same way, but I get a similar feeling reading the Marshall King and just looking at other Boichi stuff as I do when I read, is it Samurai 8, the Naruto
Yeah.
guy's next series? That series had, it was just like so much stuff in any of the panels, and right, it wasn't detailed. It just,
Hmm.
in fact, it was almost a lack of detail. There's no shading at all, but it just
Yeah.
like, it looks like, I don't know if your art teachers ever did this in elementary school, but my art teacher would sometimes, they would just like draw these squiggles and photocopy them and be like, okay, color these in. And it looks like that, just like spaghetti noodles
Yeah.
photocopied on a page sometimes. And that's how I feel looking at Boichi stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's this, like, not only is there a million things happening on one page, there's literal just like Photoshop lens flares and like this is what really did it for me. He like went into this like Photoshop like stock library of just like explosions, lens flares, gleaming
Yep.
colors, and just drags and drops them all over the page.
Hmm.
And as much as like sometimes it can be cool when he has like a crowd of people all shooting at each other or like a dust cloud of action, I feel like it just gets swallowed up by these in color because everything else is black and white. These are
Yeah.
like all like gold and purple, like explosions that are just happening all over the page and
Hmm.
drowning everything out.
Yeah. So I think that is probably the most notable thing about the Marshall King, at least separately from, some of his other stuff, which is a lot of it is, I'm not gonna say in color, but has color to it, right? Like there'll
Yeah.
just be like orange, like faint orange filters over some of the stuff, or like the sun will be kind of like peeking behind some mountains, and that will be in color, or it'll be just like a character's arms, glowing metal with like these weird like
Yeah.
bursts of light coming off of them, like lots of glinting off of metal and things like that. Um, which to me is really, it's really off-putting. That's part of the reason
Mhm.
I've never been able to get into webtoons, because
Yeah.
this has the very webtoons style color. Now I know a lot of webtoons are like
Mhm.
in full color, but just like where webtoons kind of flashes between like, it'll be in color, but it's not like all the way like super solid shading. It's just like parts of it,
Yeah.
or like, it'll be like a character's face and like, it's kind of fading into color. And then you just get these stretches of white where you have to scroll, or, there's text. This series
Mhm.
feels like that in some regards, where it's just like, hey, we're going to throw some pops of color here to like keep you a little engaged. And I guess I can sort of appreciate it from the fact that he's like, this is digital and it doesn't take me that long
Mhm.
to color it. So like, why would I not? Right? Like, we don't have to worry
Yeah.
about this being printed in full black and white. I guess they'll have to make some decision when the volumes come out, but he's probably kind of like,
Mhm.
who cares, right? Weekly, I'm having to put this
Yeah.
out digitally, and so I can put these colors in, and why would I not do that? So I can appreciate that, of just like adapting to the kind of the, I guess the like the platform you're putting your manga out on,
Mhm.
but it just doesn't look good, right? It looks
Yeah.
really bad.
It's interesting and creative, which is what I can say about a lot of the choices in this manga.
Hmm.
But interesting and creative is like a hook. You got to do something beyond that. And I feel like every time I like read a new chapter, I'm like, that was an interesting decision,
Yes.
but I don't like it.
Yep. Yeah. So I think, yeah, the art still does not work for me in this series. Like I said, tonally, it just feels very different. And I guess we can sort of segue into some of the more discussion about the manga itself. Um, because, I'll be honest, reading the Marshall King, I actually had like a pretty good time with the manga.
Yeah.
I'm not like, oh my gosh, this is going to be incredible. But honestly, the new chapter is going to come out, whatever, today or tomorrow or something like that. I'll probably pick it
Hmm.
up and I'll spend my 4 or 5 minutes reading it. Um, because it, it really is just like a pretty standard shonen manga with like this, normal like stupid shonen stuff, right? He's like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get this gun and I'm gonna stop all these bad guys, and there's like some weird kind of hazy mysticism behind it, right? Like his dad is like this world famous desperado thing. It's very like, you know obviously One Piece is not the progenitor of this type of storytelling, but like it's very One Piece kind of stuff
I
of
was gonna
like
say, well, even
right
the character designs once again are like, oh, this is just like Boichi kind of taking what he did for the
the Ace
One
thing
Piece
and
spinoff that he
yep,
did and doing his own thing with it.
exactly. But so like I think the manga itself is fine. If this were if we were still doing like the every week having to do Shonen Jump or whatever and this debuted, I think we would be like
Yeah,
I don't know, there's been worse
it's
things to
better.
have to
Yeah,
have to read.
it's better than a lot of this stuff we've had to peep.
Yeah, but the art style just feels so disconnected with what the manga is actually trying to do. Like the art style
Yeah,
feels like it should be in like your gritty, gross seinen series, and that's just not what this is at all.
yeah, it's pretty goofy, and I
Mhm.
think the manga actually does succeed when it's not trying to be super hard,
Yeah.
because there's also this like about like 3 pages per chapter drawn in like a sort of goofy chibi
Mhm.
style, and I think it actually, for one, fits the content way better, and two, like is way more fun to read.
Yeah.
I'm looking in chapter 2, like on page 28 and 29 right now. There's this it's the scene where they do the duel, and Jim the hero,
Mhm.
which I do like that his name is Jim,
Yeah.
or like
Jimu.
Jimu here,
Yeah.
which I did really like that. But he's doing the duel, and he like actually draws before the person he's fighting, but then he like intentionally shoots backwards and
Mhm.
like shoots through that person's bullet, which is like cool.
Yeah.
But then afterward, we see his eyes like turn into little snakes and like pop out of his head.
Mhm.
Like I loved that. I loved it when it happened in Kamagure Orange Road. I love it when it happens in any manga,
Yep.
but that was really cool.
Mhm.
And then like right afterward, he's still like drawn in a chibi style, and he's like crying. His eyes are turning into like little tears.
Mhm.
Like that's cool. And I think Boichi can draw that style really well. And I wish the whole manga was done in this style because it looks so much better.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that scene up too because that's the one where this series, in some ways, does feel very JoJo's, and maybe it's just because
Yeah.
JoJo's Part Seven has the Western kind of setting, and this does too. And there's not really that much manga that has you know a Western setting, right? Like,
Hmm.
not a whole lot of manga inspired by John Ford and Howard Hawks, but
Yeah.
um, you know, no Lonesome Dove manga out here, but so maybe it's just kind of lazy comparison from that regard, but like that scene where like he shoots the gun and like he's so quick that he's able to flip the gun around and shoot the bullet completely accurate
Hmm.
behind the bullet itself is so, I mean, it's so stupid and ridiculous, but
Yeah.
reading it you're kind of like, well, I don't know, I
I
think
mean,
sometimes,
it's a comic book, so he
yeah,
should be able to do stuff like
and
that.
I think sometimes with some of these mangaka it can be hard to tell like which of them are kind of doing the say like the Togashi thing, where he plays that out and it's like this is supposed to be like very cerebral or like this is going to
Yeah.
mean something. And which of them are just like, wouldn't it just be kind of funny if that happened? Or like, wouldn't this be like silly? And I
Yeah.
think Boichi falls into the latter of like, I think he's in on,
Hmm.
like this is kind of stupid stuff, but like we're gonna have fun doing it. Um,
Yeah.
it's something I've been thinking about a lot too because I recently watched the some of the Hideaki Anno Shin like
Oh
reimagining
yeah, yeah,
things,
yeah.
and Shin Kamen Rider and Shin Ultraman are very much in that zone of like, yeah, like Kamen Rider is kind of dumb, but what if I just made one of these that
Yeah.
was like really cool? And I can like appreciate that, and I think Boichi is like trying to do that here of just like this is silly and stupid, but like I'm going to try to make it look cool in my way. Unfortunately, I don't
Hmm.
know if he like necessarily succeeds in that, but I can appreciate the
Yeah.
try.
It's one of those things where it's like, if you like Boichi, you'll probably think this is like the coolest thing ever.
Yes. Yes, and
One thing about that scene too is that I think the whole like all of these scenes that take place in the school and kind of have a lighthearted tone
mhm,
work because I actually really like the sort of sidekick that he adopts.
yes,
Her name's like Agara Schaefer.
mhm,
That's what it says on. Oh, Dutch is her
Dutch,
nickname.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
was trying to find that. Like, I love that character's design
mhm,
specifically because she doesn't look like a Boichi character,
no,
and two, she's like kind of a goofy, like
mhm,
cute foil
Yeah.
for our protagonist.
The other thing that gets revealed pretty early on in the series is that the characters are all like older. She's like 38 or
Yeah,
something like that, and I think it's kind of implied that he's like in his early 30s or something like that, which I thought was pretty funny.
yeah, like because all I think they said every single person in the school is like older than 29.
Yeah.
Which I was like, no, that I was like, okay, that's really cool
Hmm.
because the second I saw they were going to enroll in a school, I was kind of excited because I do kind of like the like school setup for any manga series. It's
Yeah.
a cliche for a reason,
Hmm.
but the fact that they're like kind of more in like an academy, they're in post grad for being for being like a marshal.
Yeah. Yeah. They're yeah, they're going to be cops basically.
Yeah, I think the thing that because I do like the premise.
Mhm.
I think the whole part of the premise where he's like, my dad used to be a famous outlaw, and now I'm gonna be, a cop, basically. Like, I don't completely understand everything going on in the background,
Yeah.
but maybe it'll be explained over time.
Yeah, I think some of the setup is a little weak in that regard, but honestly, you know, I'll take the sort of, almost like half-assed version over what we get a lot of times, the kind of
Over
Ginka and Gluna
explaining.
thing of like, you know, I don't know, like there's a world at this where like we spend 2 chapters with the dad and like going into like all of his stuff and all these things and just like, at a certain point you're like, I don't care. Like let's just get into it and like you can just bring it up when it matters. And so I do appreciate that he's doing a version of that at least.
Speaking of setup, something that I was really thinking when I was reading the initial chapter that I thought was going to be a huge part of this series and wasn't was like the very explicit biblical themes that are in
Oh
like this
yeah.
whole backstory. I was like, this opens up with a verse from Ecclesiastes. Like, his dad who he kills is like buried in this cross-shaped
Mhm.
casket that he's like dragging through the desert. I was
Yep.
like, this is kind of crazy. This is kind of cool.
Mhm.
We never see it again. And maybe it's something that like pops up later in the series, but all of the biblical imagery kind of just disappears after the beginning of chapter 2.
Yeah, I liked the pages of him dragging his dad's like cross casket through the desert. It reminded me of in the old Dragon Quest games when you have party members, if one of them dies, you like their little sprite turns into a casket. So it'll be like,
Yeah.
your other party member, and then like a little casket following along. And there's actually like this really cool fan art out there of Dragon Quest 2 where it's like the hero and the princess walking. And the hero is like dragging the prince character in the casket because the prince character is like really weak in the game and always dies.
Yeah.
So it's actually like this pretty cool, like picture of it. And so it reminded me of that. I like this idea of like dragging your dead friend or dead father through your arduous journey.
Yeah, like those aspects of it I found really
Hmm.
cool, and wish it was something that was explored a little bit more. Maybe it will be later on though, because all of this is kind of related to the dad and then the Marshal King, who we've seen a little bit of.
And I will say that like obviously the series is still very early on. There's only been what like 7 chapters. I think chapter 8 should come out pretty soon.
Yeah.
Um, but like I already kind of don't know where the series is going to go. Like we had like a small little, I'm not even going to call it an arc, but like a setup, right? Where like the school gets invaded, um, by these
Hmm.
people. He kind of summons the power of his dad's arms because I guess the setup or sort of the one PC kind of backstory to this is that the first marshal had this like really powerful gun, and I guess also these other like parts that he's going to have to collect as if they're the Dragon Balls. And right now he
Yeah.
has the arms, which his dad had, and he now has the gun that he's able to fire. No one else has been able to fire the gun. I think it
Hmm.
is literally called Excalibur.
Yes.
So, but so he already has the gun and he's like, I'm going to leave the academy and stuff. And so like, I don't know what his plans are for the story. So while I am a little bit worried of like, this could go like south really quickly,
Hmm.
I am at least like intrigued of like what's he gonna do with this?
Yeah, I was kind of happy when I saw him be like, "Yeah, I can already graduate from this school
Yeah.
after having been here for like 1 day." Like that
Hmm.
was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. We
I kind of feel like he's not gonna leave the school though, or it's gonna be like a home base type thing for this
it
series.
would be weird to set up the school and all these classmates and stuff up, and then two chapters later, sort of be like, "All right, I'm out of here." There was part of me reading the last couple chapters, being like, "Oh, is this already kind of like getting the axe?"
Same, I did think that for a second.
I was like, "Is this going to be like a 15 chapter series?" But I don't know. I assume they're going to give Boichi like a pretty good run because I think Jump Plus is like a is typically they give their series like a little more time to breathe because they don't, they're not limited to just like
Yeah,
20
they could run
issues
a
or
million
whatever.
if they want.
I think there's something like 90 manga running in Jump Plus right now.
Oh
Like,
dang.
they don't really care. So I think it's sort of like if we can justify paying this manga artist and the assistants and stuff, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was speaking like the One Piece comparisons too. When they said that his dad's name was like M Godspeed, I
Oh
was like,
yeah,
okay, so is this like the will of M type stuff?
yep. I do still like the dad's name still hasn't like been fully revealed yet, right? It's
Yeah.
just M Godspeed. I do
Hmm.
love the fact that the last names are Godspeed. That also just feels very whatchamacallit, feels very JoJo's. Maybe it's just because
Oh
there's
yeah.
character Speedwagon or whatever, but
Yeah. If it
just like
was JoJo's though, it would be like the character's name would be Godspeed, you Black
yeah,
Emperor.
just say it would be M Godsmack.
Yeah.
Motorhead Godsmack is his name.
Yeah. I'd love to see like an indie rock version of JoJo's where it's like this character named Animal Collective.
The Panda Bear.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna pitch this to Shueisha when we're done here.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely should. But yeah, I mean, I think this series as a whole, like, I liked it more than I expected to be honest. I expected to kind of go into it and just be so reviled by the art style that I like couldn't do it. And I don't know, I do think it is kind of like a testament to the manga form that like the art doesn't have to be great or what you're interested in for the manga to be fine.
Hmm.
And there are times when like the manga is not great, but the art style itself just kind of carries you through it. Um, so I think it's kind of interesting to look at in that regard. I will say the one thing in this series where I think his art style does really work is with these kind of machines and stuff.
Those are very
Yeah, the
cool.
machines look really cool, and they're obviously like one, they're way too detailed, they're overly detailed, but it does kind of
Hmm.
fit into this world that is like it's a western, um, but it has this kind of steampunky element to it, and so there is this
Hmm.
kind of weird dichotomy between like they're obviously like out in the plains and like desert and stuff, and then there's just like these giant mechanized drill things that are kind of running about or like uh and then like very early on someone walks up in this like kind of Final Fantasy 6 style mech uh, thing with like all these guns attached to it and stuff, and I
Yeah,
think it actually works all right for that of like I don't know that they feel very clunky and like you can almost hear them like rattling around as they like walk through the desert.
yeah. I liked the scenes where they were fighting against like the army of desperados.
Hmm.
Some of it kind of reminded me of the battle scenes from Nausicaa when we were reading that last
Yeah.
year, because there's just like a lot of stuff going on the page at one
Hmm.
time. That sort of had like a steampunk, like Mad Max vibe to it as well.
Yeah. Hmm.
There's one panel where there's like a bunch of like snipers shooting out the windows of the school, and I thought that looked really cool.
That page is very cool. The one thing I hope that we get from the series too is more of the like just more time out west.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need some pages where they're like riding horses through the desert or riding mechs through the desert and stuff like that. Because right now we've just been because there is so few manga that are set that are like western like that. It would be nice to have one that like interrogates that a little bit more. Isn't just like this is a western, but it's just an excuse to have like revolvers in a school setting.
Yeah.
That's like a little less interesting to me.
I did feel like the title pages for each chapter kind of did suggest there's going to be some exploration because they do have a lot of like landscapes that appear. Like I'm looking at chapter 6, and there's this big mountain.
Hmm.
We're just looking at that.
Yeah, yeah. So I hope we get some time out in the desert, and I suspect we will. But that's that's really what I'm kind of hoping for.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that we get some more time to like add characters to the main party too. I really do like Dutch. I
Hmm.
found a lot of the people in the school at least like somewhat
Yeah.
interesting. So
Hmm.
I think Boichi might be pretty good at least coming up with ideas for characters. I don't necessarily always like the designs, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I was at least somewhat invested in the school.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I read the manga yesterday, and I read all 7 chapters in one sitting, and was like, it
Same.
wasn't like grueling or anything like that, at least to me,
Hmm.
which was what I was expecting. I was expecting to kind of go into it and be like, oh my gosh, right? Like I'm only
Yeah,
one
this was
chapter
well
in.
paced.
Hmm.
This was a rare thing where I was almost like, this could have been a little bit slower, actually, and I almost never say that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Yeah, he does sort of like rush through it a little bit, but I will say it doesn't feel messy in that regard.
Hmm.
You can definitely tell that he is like he's done this before, right? Like he is a pro.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's at least very clean and professional, despite just like stylistically not being my thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that does it for my notes on the Marshal King. Do you have anything else to add about the series?
Um, I think I'm good. Just like they really need to slow down with some of the light blooms and stuff. It's just too
It's
much, and
egregious.
it's a cool. It would be a cool gimmick if they did it like once in a while.
Yes.
Like he pulls out the arms, and the arms are gold.
Sure. Yeah.
Like that would be cool.
Hmm.
Or there's like a part where there's like a train that's delivering gold to like the central bank.
Hmm.
Like and it had like a little glow around it. Like that's cool. I think they should specifically save it for things that are gold because then it would like it seems like gold obviously is like a currency here. It's like really important. So
Hmm.
having like these like treasure items have a glow would be very cool.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, when every chapter just has like spammed, copy pasted explosions everywhere, like the color thing loses the novelty value after a few pages.
Yeah, or if he did it, because I think pretty early on, I don't know if it's like directly after Dutch is introduced, but pretty early when she is, there's a page where she is in color. And so if he did it for
Yeah, that
something
was
like
cool.
that, that like when characters are introduced, there's like even if it's just like a small panel where they're colorized, so that you can kind of mentally get like, oh, she has a blue hat, or like, that kind of thing. I'd be fine with it in that regard. But yeah, just the way it is now, it's these weird like rays of light and just like
Yeah.
like there the panel where the arms are like shooting out of the casket, it just has like these like 6 dots of just white blinding light on it that like kind of obscures most of the page, and it's like, what? Why?
Yeah, like color is one thing, but it's just these like generic looking
Effects.
lens flare effects that
Yeah.
don't do it for me
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah, I need them to really cool it with that. um
Mm.
but so I think that does it for kind of the Marshall King discussion. um Jude, what kind of other manga and stuff have you been checking out this week?
Yeah, I've been slacking on it a bit because I've had a lot of schoolwork, but I am very excited for City to come out this June.
Mhm.
The trailer was released, I think, last week, and just based on the style and like color palette here, this might be one of the best looking animated drop in
Oh,
years. I
yeah.
am very locked in for this.
Yeah, it looks awesome. The just like the solid coloring in it is really cool, and something like I don't really think I've seen before in an anime.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just like a one to one of what the covers
Mhm.
for Keiichi Iraoi's book collections look
Yeah.
like, which is a really good thing because he has one of my favorite art styles.
Mhm.
And I was a bit worried about how it would translate to animation because, like, he obviously Kyoto Animation did a really good job with Nishijo in the past, but Nishijo is a bit less stylized than his newer work. He's
Mhm.
really like in the past like 5 years, he's really gotten this like distinct style down with like super thick lines that is it's very manga.
Yeah.
Like I was like, how are they gonna like translate this to the page? But they did a good job of it. And I think there's a lot of CGI being used here, at least based on the trailer. Like
Mm.
some of the characters looked like kind of that 2.5D style
Yeah.
you see in stuff like, the Spider-Verse movies
Hmm.
or the Peanuts movie that came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
But I think they did a good job with it. Like this is a very unique animation
Hmm.
style.
Yeah. If at the very least, like when I watched the trailer, I wasn't like put off by any of the CG, right? Like it worked
Yeah.
well in context, which I think is all you can sort of ask for that stuff. Yeah, I've actually been kind of chipping away at Nichijou. I read the first volume this past week. Um,
Oh, hell yeah.
I'm enjoying it. I'm not like I said, I'm only like one volume in, and it's just like
Hmm.
it's a silly slice of life gag series.
Yeah.
Like I don't really have any like thoughts on it other than like had a fun time reading it so far.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have any like specific manga recommendations this week. There's like a bunch of stuff I've been kind of picking at, but I figured next week our episode we're gonna add some more Tankobon essentials, and so I thought as part of that we could maybe go into more detail on like various recommendations and
Hmm.
stuff too. So I'll maybe detail all the because I've got like 6 or 7 series I've just been like chipping away at or reading a few chapters of. So maybe I'll just kind of burn through
Yeah.
some of those then. But my two recommendations are actually going to be both anime related. One is the anime Buddy Daddies.
Mm.
Perhaps one of the worst names in anime, like not
Yes.
appealing at all. Um, but I was just looking for something to just kind of like throw on while I was cooking dinner or like eating or something like that. And I saw
Yeah.
this pop up and I saw it only had like 12 or 13 episodes. And I knew that people really liked it. Like it had done well and they maybe won some anime award or something like, Crunchyroll anime, best, new anime, something like that. So I was like, all right, I'll
Yeah.
throw it on. And it actually, it's nothing like amazing. It's very much, you know, uh, kind of in the wake of the Spy Family boom of just like,
Yeah.
these two like assassin hitman guys, kind of end up having to sort of take in this little girl and like, she's cute, but like there's this weird dichotomy between their like grisly, bloody job and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But like it does it pretty well. The characters are pretty fun. I will say I'm watching the dub of it, just because it's
Yeah.
more, kind of second screen background noise for me. And the dub is fine. It's not, I think
Hmm.
anymore like the dubs aren't great, but for the most part, they're pretty serviceable. So, I'm not like
Yeah.
a
People
sub
who are
purist.
still like dubs are just trash.
Yeah.
Like I don't feel that at all.
No, I mean, I think the sub is like generally preferred. Like, you should probably watch
Yeah.
things like that. But I don't know. To be honest, this is not a series that I'm like going to sit down and like listen to the sub and read the subtitles for. So it's kind of like I
Yeah.
either watch it with the dub or I'm just never going to watch this thing. So I think
Exactly.
it's fine enough for that. And then the other anime is So I'm a Spider, So What? Which
Oh
similarly,
yeah.
this is one that I remember when it was coming out. It was kind of like during COVID or like just after COVID kind of era when it came out. I remember just
Hmm.
like being intrigued by the name. It's another of these like light novel adaptation things with like the long name that kind of tells you what the manga is or the
Yeah.
anime. But similarly, I threw it on as just like something to kind of just like have a show on when I want to watch something for 20 minutes, and it's pretty good. It's an isekai where this girl gets kind of turned into a spider, and so it's got all these like, these video gaming elements. She's like leveling up and like evolving and stuff like that. But it's done in a way that I think is like pretty good. She's like a pretty fun character to hang out with. There is some like pretty egregious CG for some of the monsters that
Yeah.
looks pretty bad, but if you're just kind of like throwing it on the background, pretty good series, pretty fun, and I'm interested enough in it that I was like, oh, this is a fun series. Interested to see where this goes, and I'll probably keep watching it.
Hmm.
I'm not a huge like isekai guy, but every now and then one of these comes across, and I'm like, I can do this one.
Yeah.
All right, dude, what's your kind of bonus recommendation this week?
Last night I was like just looking for random shows to put on HBO, and I started watching this new one that I heard some good things about called The Pit.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a series about an emergency room that's like it's basically filmed and scripted like in real time. So like each episode is an hour, and each episode is like titled like 8 a.m. to 9
Okay,
a.m.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like it's progressing
Mm-hmm.
as like it's progressing 1 to 1 on what's happening on the
Sure.
screen. Um, so I started and I watched like 4 hours of it last night while I was like extremely sore from my run this morning, and I was like locked in. I think I could have, if I had time, I would have just gone through the whole series. But it's extremely gross and hard to watch at times
Mm-hmm.
because they do like very realistic looking practical effects to show like surgeries and injuries taking place. But I think the pacing of it and like the real time element makes it feel really immersive. The only thing I don't like is that it's way too quippy and every character is like constantly joking.
Mm-hmm.
That always annoys me,
Mm-hmm.
especially in like this type of show.
Yeah.
But I was able to overlook that just because like the action was so compelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've not seen it, but like I've seen it pop up on HBO Max, and
Yeah.
like there was another podcast I was listening to where they recommended it. And it it sounds pretty cool. I like that premise of like being in like quote unquote real time. I think that that's
Yeah.
pretty. I don't know. That's a cool thing. It like there's not that many shows that do stuff like that. Like the only thing I can think of
Hmm.
is there's a movie Cleo from 5 to 7. Um,
Yeah, I remember you talking about
yeah,
that. I was thinking about that.
I think it's Agnes Varda who did that one.
It
Um,
is, yeah.
but that one, it does take place over like, it's like a 2 hour movie, and it is Cleo from 5 to 7 o'clock kind of
Hmm.
deal. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, I like that like kind of conceit.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's enough of a novelty that like when I saw that's what was happening, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
now I'm interested.
My recommendation this week is going to be the game Guilty Gear XX Accent Core Plus R. Um,
Amazing title.
It yeah, incredible. It is funny. It's one of these things that like a lot of Japanese fighting games will do where they're like, the game was Guilty Gear. It might have just been Guilty Gear X, or Guilty Gear XX was like the game. And
Yeah.
they just kept like adding stuff on it as they did these like revisions and things like that. Um, but it's a game. It's a Guilty Gear fighting game that came out. I don't know, like 2006 or something like that. At least like the base
Hmm.
version did. But it's on. I got it on Steam for like $3.50 or something like that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
As just like, yeah, sure, I'll pick this up. It's got rollback netcode, and the player base is pretty low. There's like 100 people online at any given time, but thankfully,
Yeah.
it's a 1v1 fighting game, so it doesn't really matter. But it's just really fun. Like, it's stupid. The game is hard. It's ridiculous, but it has all the cool Guilty Gear characters that people like. And, the online is pretty barren, but basically everyone just goes to like the casual lobby. And so everyone will be
Yeah.
there and you just start matching people. I went 1 in 30 in my first day
Oh hell
playing. So I
yeah.
was getting just completely smoked, but having a good time. It's one of these things that like if you pick it up, you definitely have to go in with the mindset of like, I mean, there are people like you can see how many games they've played when you like click on someone's
Oh
profile.
shit.
And so some
Yeah.
people it'll be like, they played 300 games, and you're like, okay, like because you can actually grind games pretty quick in it. They go by pretty
Hmm.
fast. And like I said, the first day I played for maybe a couple hours and played like 30 games. So like you
Yeah.
can just jam through them. But there was one dude I remember I looked at his profile and he played like 30,000 matches. So
Jesus. That's
like
crazy.
there are some like you can literally play like other new players like me, or you can play people that where it's like they never stopped playing this game. They've been playing every day since 2006 or whatever, and they're still playing. But yeah, it's really fun. I got it. My brother got it, so we played the other day. So if you have like a computer that can run it at all, I definitely recommend picking it up. It's
Mm.
just a fun time, just like get in there, get smacked around, and one of these things where it's like, oh, I landed my combo. Mentally, that feels like I won this game.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a good
That's fire.
time. Yeah, and the online the netcode works really well. Like I was playing people that had like 150 ping and stuff, and the games felt pretty fine to me. I've kind of reignited my fighting game kick. I'm playing a lot of the Street Fighter 6 again
Oh hell yeah.
too. Just yeah, a fun time mixing it up with randoms. So yeah, if any listener wants to get on the Guilty Gear XXAC plus R grind, hit me up. I will play matches against you. But yeah, I think that does it for our episode this week. Like I said, next episode we're going to be doing kind of adding some more Tankobon essentials. Probably add a handful to our kind of essentials list. So we'll go over that. Or if you want to kind of get refreshed on our first Tankobon essentials, I don't remember the actual episode number. I want to say it's in the 80s, like maybe 89 or something like
Yeah.
that. Because I actually listened to it not that long ago. Uh, but you can go listen to that, get refreshed on what our essentials are, and then yeah, come hear the additional ones. So yeah, as usual, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Hit us with the follow, subscribe, comment, whatever you want, interact however you want to. And yeah, uh, we'll see you when we see you.